And welcome to another episode of the Dawg on It Trucking Podcast. My guest this week is none other than Mr. Nelson from Halifax. Nelson, come on in and join us. There we go. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Chris. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. What's the weather like today in Halifax on December 2nd, I think?
Well, I'd have to say in early December, it's a little bit of a rotten November kind of a day. It's rainy and spitty and a little chilly, but it's supposed to get better for the next 2 days. So we're always hopeful in the Maritimes for a change in the weather.
Well, we all get changes in the weather, and right now I had to shovel and everything else yesterday. But Nelson, what's the name of the company that you are running?
Contingency Safety Solutions.
And what the heck does Contingency Safety Solutions do?
Well, we are an occupational health and safety training company, and we also offer occupational health and safety management systems and implementation. Okay. That's what we do.
How does occupational health and safety relate to trucking?
Well, there's, I guess to step back a little bit, Chris, my first experience with truckers and trucking was I had to lie about my age at 15 years old to get a job in a Truckers Inn motel with a lounge, restaurant, steakhouse, laundry service, 110 room in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And I worked the 4 to 12 shift every day, and I got to see and learn a lot. I've kind of been involved in and around it most of my life. And I think of all the industries, the industry that faces the most perils on a daily basis is trucking.
And sorry, why do you think on a daily basis we face the most perils, as you said?
The most unknown things on the road in all conditions, oftentimes on the road too long. Historically, I think that's changing for the future and changing now. Trucking is a very difficult job.
It is a difficult job. And with ELDs, either present or about to come, depending on the nature of the trucking company. I was just reading about the Ontario law that they proposed, and it looks like they're going to mimic the federal law almost word for word. So, and the feds are bringing ELDs in June of 2021. So, sorry?
Go ahead. No.
Yeah, and of course, if you're an American carrier, if you're a Canadian carrier that goes to the States, you've already had ELDs for quite some time. So ELDs, I think, have improved the hours of service, compliance, and improved the work environment. But still, truckers get hurt every day.
Yes. I agree. And I'm a very big proponent of ELDs. I think it's a great idea. I think it's essential. I think it protects the public, it protects the driver, and ultimately protects the companies and their insurance providers.
Well, for some reason, I don't know why, in the past, truck drivers have been measured by how well they can cheat and lie.
And how tough they are.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, that has caused some crashes and cost lives and injuries and everything else. So what is it? Where do you service? What area do you service mostly?
Predominantly Atlantic Canada, but we're also growing and entering, like everybody is today, the digital online training world, and we're working with partners in the trucking world to add our courses to their lineup. And I'm not sure if it's okay to mention this, but We've recently signed on with Carrier's Edge. We think they're an incredible organization. We're very impressed. Their platform's really amazing. It's well done. And we look forward to participating with them and actually promoting their platform and our services on a regular basis.
Sorry, I'm just scrambling to make a note. I'll put a link in the show notes to the interview I did with Jane. Jane is the co-founder of Carrier's Edge, and she appeared on the podcast some weeks ago. So I'll put a link in the show notes for that. I agree with you. Carrier's Edge is an outstanding company, and I too have partnered with them for some of their services. So tell me more about what you're putting on the platform and how that will affect trucking companies.
Well, initially, we're going to try to work in the areas of one, an introduction to occupational health and safety on a federal level, due diligence and the standard applied, and third, creating a safety culture. And we are really interested in working with some of the small to medium trucking companies. We believe that safety culture starts from ownership and management. If the owners and managers buy in and represent a positive safety culture, it permeates throughout the organization. It makes companies far more productive. It makes driver retention much higher. And if people are happy to go to work for their employer and feel safe, then to me, that's a positive that we can all work towards.
Yeah, and I think that's something that has been lacking in the past in some trucking companies, certainly not in all, but you've got to be able to go to work and believe that your boss has your best interest at heart and that they truly want you to be safe and perform your job safe. And moving the freight is a secondary exercise to the employee's safety. So how is this going to work on Carrier's Edge? When do you think your first offering is going to be available? And then how is it all going to fit together for a trucking company? Because you said this is going right across Canada, basically.
Well, we're hoping to, and we're hoping to work into some of the cross-border training as well going forward as we develop our training programs, to cater to the trucking industry and some of the issues that they're running into, especially in today's world where there's lots of issues at the border with the pandemic concerns that are happening right now. And there's a lot of political turmoil at the borders right now. So, and the truckers are feeling the brunt of this, and the trucking companies are paying for it and feeling the brunt of it. So we are in the process right now of digitizing these 3 courses. We hope to have them done before Christmas, ready for the new year, and added to.
What are the courses?
The courses are an introduction to occupational health and safety, a federal introduction. So it will encompass all the regions of Canada, a due diligence and the standard applied for businesses and their legal obligations. And we are creating a safety culture course together.
Awesome.
And we're going to add those to the program. As long as Carrier's Edge approves everything, they have a pretty high standard for what they add to their program. So,
yeah, no, that sounds awesome because I'm not aware that there's anything like that on the platform right now.
No, and that's why we went through their platform, and we didn't want to copy anybody. We don't want to try to take anybody else's business that's already operating successfully on that platform. That's not our intent. Our intent is to work with the trucking industry and fill voids and gaps where our expertise allows us to, really.
Yeah, so give us a suggestion. I just left a company yesterday that I think has a great culture. How do you build a safety culture in a company?
Well, I think you start again back to ownership and top management, and you have initial conversations with those people to find out where their program is, how it works with the employees, whether it's interactive, whether it's progressive or updated. And I think one of the things that we concentrate on is communication from the front line workers in trucking and all industries with middle and upper management. So everybody's on the same page. And that is a learning and an implementation process. It doesn't happen overnight. I don't think it's a system that you can put in 3 months and have your insurers and the workers' compensation boards believe, or your workers believe that you really have a safety culture. I think it's something that has to be worked on and operated on every day, recorded. There needs to be tracking, and there needs to be ongoing training in various fields.
Ongoing training for sure. And of course, not to promote Carrier's Edge, but that's one of the ways that truck drivers can receive ongoing training. But one of the areas that I see often not attacked, or for lack of a better word, just neglected, is the documentation of it all. I was at a carrier recently, and we were talking like, do you do monthly building inspections? Yep. Do it every day or every month. And I look at my fire extinguishers, and I actually looked at a fire extinguisher, and sure enough, there was initials there. I said, then what documentation do you have to show what defects you found? And of course, they had none. Do you help out in areas like that as well?
Well, yes, a lot of this comes down to the effectiveness of your JOSH committee, your Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, and its relationship to management. In my opinion and my experience, I've sat on many, I've led a couple, I've created a couple, and I've been in situations where management was very responsive and reactive to workers and safety concerns. And I've been in situations where we were just to meet once a month and rewrite our list. One of the things that I found that worked when we did implement a program is what you mentioned, is when we documented. And we documented our meetings, we documented our inspections, our equipment, our building, our safety practices. It always seemed to work better. But it was always dependent on management and ownership being involved and taking it seriously. And I think that's changed to a great deal in today's culture. And I think people understand that a safe workplace is a healthy and profitable workplace today. So I think there's lots of opportunity for us to work with companies. And I think there's a lot of companies that want and need that kind of service, personally.
Well, first of all, I mean, when I go into my clients, typically 50 trucks and less are the size of my accounts. And if I ask them about joint health and safety committee, they often look at me as if I have two heads. So yes, what size of company is required to have a joint health and safety committee?
In our region, 10 people.
Okay, I believe it's different because I always thought it was 20. Is that a federal standard, or are we?
I believe that's a provincial standard here.
Okay.
That in Nova Scotia, it's when you reach 10 employees, you're required to have a health and safety plan and an occupational health and safety committee.
All right. And those employees who work remote, such as truck drivers who very seldom show up at the sites, are they counted in that number?
That I'm not sure, Chris. That's a very good question. And there may be caveats to that based on the trucking industry, but that's something that I have a conversation this week with the Trucking Association of Nova Scotia, and it's certainly a question I'm going to pose to them, because you've kind of caught me with my proverbial pants down on that one. I don't know.
And I didn't mean to.
No, that's good.
It's my understanding
That's
that
good.
all employees count, no matter where they work.
That's the whole idea, and in particularly truckers who are probably 80 or 90% of their time is remote.
Yeah.
They spend very little time in a terminal, or, if they're at a loading dock, it's somebody else's normally.
It's a great question, I think, nowadays to ask the Trucking Association, because I think in the future, we're going to have a lot more office people working remote as well.
Yes, as I am today.
Right. Well, I mean, with COVID, we've changed. The way of office work has changed. So, but anyways, going back to joint health and safety committees, I really believe this is a neglected area of many trucking companies. And it's my understanding in Ontario, at least, trucking companies with 20 or more employees have to have a joint health and safety committee. And I believe they count Driver Inc. drivers in that number as well. That I'm not sure of, but it would be interesting to know if they count Driver Inc.
I'm going to ask the question. I will pose the question this week when I have my conversation.
All right, and can you?
Because I'd like to know too.
Yeah, well, get back to me with the answer, because when this goes live on Friday, as you update me, I can put the answer in the show notes and update the
Okay.
So
I hope I can get us an answer by Friday.
Well, it doesn't have to be by Friday, but as soon as you do get the answer, because this episode's going to live for years, I hope.
Oh, I see. Yes, and you can add it to the right.
And I can put it in the show notes. So, and I didn't mean to catch you, as you said, with your pants down, because God, I don't want to see that.
No, it's not pretty anymore. It's just not. But no, I'm not sure of that either. My significant other, my wife of almost 35 years, she obviously thought so at one time, and I'm keeping her fooled, so I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. But no, Chris, one of the reasons we have these conversations, and I became so interested in your podcast, is because of, one, the casual nature of the conversation, and two, I find in every podcast I've watched so far, there's questions posed that do make you raise your eyebrows from both sides, from yours and from the guest side. And that's, if we're going to improve and we're going to teach safety culture, then we have to be open to learning too. So you'll never shock me or embarrass me by asking me a question I don't know. There's lots of them that I don't know the answer to.
And I appreciate that, because I really believe the best experts in every field don't know it all. And when you recognize that, hey, I don't know that answer, but I know where I can find it out, that's one of the reasons you're a trusted expert, because they believe that you just don't shoot the from the hip. You know what I mean? You find out the answer first before you lead a client down the wrong path.
Well, and I think and hope that's one of my talents is I'm reluctant to give out an answer or an untrue answer or make up an answer on the spot. And I try my hardest to surround myself with intelligent, respected people in industry and network that way. And I learned very early in my life in business, and especially when I stepped out on the road in sales, stepping into somebody's shop and pretending I knew more than them wasn't very successful. So I was the first one to say, I'm not sure, let me find the answer, and then search for someone who really knew the answer. And that's always worked pretty well for me. So, and that's what I'm trying to do in the trucking safety business, and work towards helping these companies become not only safe, but operational. Because my understanding, Chris, if you don't mind me changing the topic a little bit, is the insurance providers are starting to tighten up what they expect and what they'll accept for safety programs with companies going forward. And they're looking for programs that are in place, operational, and effective, not somebody who runs out and gets a program in place for 3 months ahead of their insurance audit. And you might get away with that once, but you might get rated for it. And if you try it twice, you will get rated or refused. And that's what I've been learning through webinars and podcasts. And actually, that's one of the conversations that initially opened up, I believe, and the reason I found out about Carrier's Edge was your podcast with Jane initially.
Well, I'm glad that it did something. Yeah. And in regards to the insurance companies, you're absolutely correct in that the insurance industry has gotten much tougher. Currently, they are putting more trucking companies out of business or into financial hardship than the local DOT or Department of Transportation is, because they've really tightened up. And yes, they want to see safety measures much more than just safe driving now. They are asking the health and safety committees and what are you doing for employees, health benefits, many different things.
And as you mentioned, what are you recording?
Yeah, the documentation. This is what you've got to show that auditor. And some of the insurance companies, as you know, that's my background, is I used to be one of those fellas in the insurance company. And I, as much as I never called it an audit when I worked for them, what would you call a visit from somebody who can greatly affect your insurability, whether you actually get insurance or not, and greatly affect your premium if you're offered insurance? What would you call that? I know some of the people, they call it a review, a visit. It's a flippin'
you can call it what you want. It's scary and it's life-changing for these companies. And I think we can help alleviate some of it and prevent some of it. And that's what we're hoping to work towards. And we want to work in actually the exact same arena you do, Chris, the 50 trucks and smaller industry. I think some of the bigger companies are advanced in this area, or they wouldn't still be in business. They wouldn't be able to keep their trucks on the road or their drivers insured or retain drivers. I think it's just part of the evolution of the industry today. But some of the small trucking companies have a little more difficulty with that. They struggle a little more with revenues at times as well, and it can be pretty scary for them from their perspective. And every time there's a change in legislation or a change in politics, sometimes it seems to affect the transportation industry.
It's huge things. Almost everything affects transportation. I mean, look at how COVID has affected transportation. But I got to ask you a question. If you could give one tip to those small trucking companies of 50 and less, what would your piece of advice be?
I guess, and geez, I hate to sound like it comes out of a book, but embrace safety. It makes your company more profitable. Your customers recognize it. Your drivers and employees recognize it. And you get loyalty from all of the above when it's fully represented. People are observant.
I think that's well said. I think that's perfect. You've got to embrace it. And then from our point of view, you also have to document it so that you can prove that you did what you say you did. Because a lawyer friend of mine once told me about the 3 Ps: policies, procedures, and proof. And he said, which one do you think I lack when I go to court?
Right. It's number 3, always. And And we're all reluctant, especially people who work in the blue collar world and work hands on and aren't always in front of a computer or around paperwork. This is a little bit of the challenge that's to be bridged to make this more accessible, easier. I guess if it involves everybody and it's not laid at the end on the driver alone, and it's at every level through administration and management and ownership. Driver compliance, I think you're going to get rogues in every industry, of course, but I think for the most part, driver compliance and driver participation will follow suit.
Yeah.
That's my personal belief.
I agree. Now, for our listeners, I will put your contact info in the show notes below if somebody wants to reach out and get some advice on occupational health and safety committees, both in the Atlantic region, but even right across Canada. As you say, you can offer services to any Canadian corporation because you know the federal regs.
Yes, and we can certainly offer our occupational health and safety management systems to companies regardless of their level of safety maturity. We can integrate with their system, help them grow their system, make proper recommendations to their system, and then help them implement their system, including their safe work practices, their operational practices, show them how to write them properly, how to record them, as you say, properly, documentation. And it's not a once over thing where you have a couple of meetings and then it's over and everybody's magically cured. This is a thing where you work with the company over a year and 2 years and become a resource for them. And really, as I've mentioned in the past, Chris, I may have said it to you, if we do our job right, we kind of work ourselves out of a job with each company eventually.
Yeah, and that's right. Once you set the processes up, very similar to what I do, and I'm not a health and safety expert. I like to think of myself as the safety and compliance expert. I know National Safety Code and SMS and that stuff. Your area, I don't know very much about at all. And it's a totally distinctive area. Nelson, what else do we need to know about either you or your company before we wrap this up?
Well, a little bit of history. One of the reasons that pushes me into this area of safety is my middle child, oldest daughter, entered the trucking industry at 20 years old. And for 5 years, she drove a tilt deck tow truck, about 30% roadside and about 70% equipment delivery to construction and industrial sites. Did a few runs back and forth to Ontario and Quebec. And I was worried every time she went out the door. And in all conditions, and she to make a living in it, she had to work almost 70 hours a week. That's a little bit of a thing in my, a little bone that I have with not the trucking industry, but industry around the trucking industry. My understanding is that rates are going to go up in the future, and I believe that's a good thing. She left the industry after 5 years, a little bit because of safety, and she got scared a couple of times. And now she's just taking her third block of apprentice electrical. But that's what spurred me into this, along with some of my best friends over the years are safety trainers and very experienced ones. And my top two trainers and one of my partners between them have over 75 years of industrial, commercial, construction, offshore and onshore oil and gas, and international training experience. So that's who I draw on for my expertise. I've never taught a training course in my life, but since 1999, I've been on every occupational health and safety committee and involved in safety and taken every safety course that they would allow me to take. So big proponent. And years ago, I owned a restaurant where we had so much safety, it was crazy. We had food safety and knife safety and spill safety and burn safety. And it's just always been there, Chris.
That's perfect.
That's us, really.
Nelson. So for anybody that's listening and watching, first of all, I'd like to say thank you. Nelson's contact info is in the show notes below, and you can reach out to Nelson and he would be happy, I'm sure, to get an email or a phone call from you. Nelson,
We
I want to
certainly
thank
would.
you for coming on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you loved the show as much as I did. Please leave us a like, a thumbs up, a review, a comment, a rating if it is in your heart. Thank you so much. And I do really appreciate your time. And join us again next week for another exciting interview.